It's so good to be back with you again. This is Seth Moore coming from Anchor by Spotify, as well as Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and Amazon.com, Apple Music, Amazon, I think I just mentioned, and also Patreon. So, again, we're back, and we're going to, as before, bringing you information on Brits. And as I said before, we're not done. There's so much to cover. I cannot cover all of this in one episode, as you probably already know. And so we're going to be giving you this information. And again, we're telling you, and we mentioned before, how critical it is, and to keep reminding you that in present day politics and global iteration and things that are happening around the world, that you know, so that you're not caught off guard, so that you will keep focus and you'll have your mind geared towards things that are important. See, because we can actually be led astray. We can actually be, be bamboozled because we're not staying, current. Get some water here. And so we want you to know. And so that's why we come on, and sometimes we even do maybe 2 or 3 podcasts within a day, because we want you to have the information. Now, one of the things that, we're going to be talking about, and we want you to know too, is that what you have to understand is that the United States and these European countries are not multilateral. They're only multilateral when it comes to them. They're unilateral when it comes to anyone else. And of course, if you don't look like them. So they'll sequester different strategies and tactics to topple or to stagnate the growth of other countries. And they have many ways in which they can do this. So there's such a thing that's called global hegemony. In other words, this has happened to black people forever. And what is hegemony? Hegemony is when you impede the progress of a people by creating conditions to keep them poor. And then you don't allow them to have flexibility and the mobility to move as others move. Okay? Economically, socially, domestically, you name it. And all of those things are infused in different areas such as housing, banking, education, and the list goes on and on and on. Okay, so we want you to be aware of that. And there's so many, like I said, there's so many areas to cover that we can't give you all of this sometimes within 60 minutes, because there's so much information to cover that we have to keep coming back, and we have to kind of layer the episodes with more information so that you actually have an opportunity to hear us and to get the information. Okay? So that's kind of like how I'm doing it, so that you can actually be abreast of the information. So give us a minute as we gather everything together, and we're going to be jumping right into this information so that we can give it to you. Okay? So just hold for us. And we'll be right back during this commercial break.
Antioxidant goodness in Palm Wonderful makes it a potent weapon against free radicals. Palm Wonderful, the antioxidant superpower.
Nigeria versus Ghana country comparison. Welcome to Pied and thanks for watching. Nigeria and Ghana are two West African countries that have much in common with one another. They both share a common coastal border, inhabit territory similar to one another, including rainforest, savanna, and jungle. Both nations have their own
So we're back, and we are here to give you this information. Okay, so we hope that you're still there. And again, remember to support us. Remember to click the button, and remember to like, share, and subscribe. And this information, I hope you are. I really do hope that you are taking all of this in, and just how critical it really is. Because as you know, that there's an energy that's in the atmosphere now. And if you're not raising your vibration, if you're not paying attention, see, because some of us are on the wrong stuff. I don't, if your mindset is constantly in a party mode, or it's all about going to the next event, and everything around you is like evading you, something is wrong. I mean, because if you're not paying attention to what's happening, obviously you're asleep. And I'm not saying that to insult you, but I'm saying that to wake you. Because 2023 is going to be a very interesting year. Trust me when I tell you this. You heard it from me. It's going to be interesting like no other year since the 21st century. It's going to be very interesting. Okay, because I can give you a whole lot of mathematical equations as to the number 2 and 3, how critical those numbers are, and how that numbers fuel how the universe vibrates, and how things happen, and how things unveil themselves. Okay? So I want you to pay attention. The thrust of the demand is for the G20 countries to adopt a more practical approach to Africa's development problems and stop the aids and grants disbursement. And sometimes, as I read here, I seem to get tongue tied a little bit. But understand these things. And then you're gonna know how critical they really are. This year's G20 meeting was held in Hamburg, Germany between July 7th and 8th, 2017. Also created an African Development Center initiative called the G20 African Partnership. This initiative is not different from all others created in similar high government events. And in an attempt to tell the global leaders what Africa needs, Nigeria's acting president, Professor Yemi, these guys got some hellified names, don't they? I think his name is Osinbajo, wrote the meeting, since we are not invited. The thrust of Osinbajo's letter is for the global leaders to move beyond pledges to support Africa's future and in Europe's secrecy. So in other words, you already know that when Europe has these meetings and before the African nations come and they're a part of these meetings, you already know that they're not going to unveil exactly what their intent is. I mean, really, come on. They're not going to unveil their intent of what they disclose in their meetings in terms of how they want to deal with the continent, right? Because as I mentioned a moment ago, the European nations, along with the U.S., is not dealing with the African nations in a multilateral fashion or platform, which only means that the difference between unilateral and multilateral is just that in a unilateral sense, there's only a couple of nations that have inclusiveness, and there's many other definitions, but there's only a couple of people who are privy to certain information while other nations are being sequestered to this type of treatment, and this is why, again, BRICS, for a larger part, was formed. See, because with BRICS being formed with these different nations, then what it does is it gives them leverage. It gives them leverage economically, with having, of course, all of these, oil, mineral-rich nations against the European Union, the G20, G7, and so forth. Okay, so it gives them straight up skin in the game. You know what I mean? So now they have to be concerned with, because as of yet, these 12 other nations who intend to come on with BRICS are in the process of becoming, a multilateral part of this contingency. Okay? And so now, what is the move going to be for the U.S. and these European nations? And of course, you already know that they've already made their moves. Okay, they already made their moves, and one of their moves thus far was against Ghana. So which is the next African nation they're going to try to topple or destroy their economy? Because it's coming. Trust me, it's coming. I can tell you that for certain. It's coming. It's certainly coming. Okay, so now and I mentioned this I think a couple of days ago in the other podcast. They have to be really concerned now because now Saudi Arabia has given them, their confidence that they're soon to become a part of BRICS. And already I mentioned the other day that Saudi Arabia told the U.S. said, look, we're reducing you guys by 2 million barrels of oil unless we strike a new deal. So now what is the response of the U.S. and these European nations going to do? Oh, because right now, European nations are at a serious deficit. They're at an energy deficit right now as we speak. France is burning coal. Germany is trying to strike up deals with the continent. I think if I'm not sure, they did a deal with I think it was either Zambia, because I can name any country in the continent, and they're mineral rich. That's the place where the Creator started everything, and it's not a question about Africa's mineral richness. See, but these nations who continue to want to subjugate and exploit the continent for their own benefit is waning. It's waning every day. It's actually, and they're holding on. They're doing everything possible that they can actually do to maintain or to stay on board with the continent. They're using every trick in the book, trust me, because as I mentioned, these European nations are at an energy deficit, so they're fighting. This is why you hear all of these conversations about, carbon emissions, global warming, and all these countries wanting to go green. One big reason is because they know sooner or later that a lot of these countries are moving away from oil. They're moving away from natural gas. But these are the things right now that are keeping these countries, as I reiterate all the time, keeping them solvent. I don't know how many times I have to say that, but these are the things that are keeping them solvent, keeping them on the world stage and keeping them, surviving. So it's interesting to see what is actually happening. It's really interesting to see, and how it's unfolding, because, of course, the continent has a trump card if they know how to play it. They if they know how to play it. See, but the downside to the continent, unfortunately, is that it's like, you starting out at the blocks, like running a track race, 100-meter or the 440 or whatever. The U.S. and all these European countries, they done been around the damn laps. They done been around the track 100 times before you even got off the blocks. So that's the problem for the longest time that the continent has had, is that you're trying to play catch up. And so with all the infrastructure and so forth going on with, China, Russia, and other countries that are investing, everybody wants to invest in Africa because they know the continent has everything that everybody needs. Everybody needs. Can't survive without them. Period. Okay, so China, with their Belt Road Initiative with the continent, is doing great infrastructure there. Okay, and unlike the U.S. and European nations, China has an amicable relationship with the continent, and Russia as well. And there have been accusations as to, China and Russia is creating, colonial debt in the continent, which I don't believe, because I do the research. And for the most part, their loans with China are that they have loans that are interest-free loans in a lot of cases with the continent, with the exception, as I mentioned before, a lot of the commercial loans where there's obviously interest and so forth. But a lot of the loans that they do are interest-free loans where, of course, there's agreements where, and everything is not perfect. Don't get me wrong. Everything with China and is not perfect, but at least they sit down at the table with an agenda as opposed to the U.S. The U.S. never has an agenda with the continent. Every time the U.S. and the Europeans come talk with the Africans, it's always, you know, this kind of attitude, a pejorative attitude of them looking down on the continent. You know, like, we're going to tell you what we want. We're going to tell you how this is going to go. And that's that, you know, because the U.S. is like, okay, we got the dollar. And see, and the thing is the continent, they need the dollar. They do. Until they can use their resources to you know, and to industrialize their economies, meaning that which they have in place now, which they do have in place. The African nations have in place a trade agreement between the countries in Africa, where they'll start doing trade with one another, and somehow they'll be able to strengthen their currency. So of course, again, BRICS is going to play a great role in this, because with Saudi Arabia, Argentina, Iran, Venezuela, who else? They got many other countries. Nicaragua. They got all of these other countries. And these countries, mind you now, they're rich in resources too. But they've suffered and undergone the same treatment as the African countries. It's to dismantle, to keep their economies weak, so forth, so on. You know, so this is the game. This is the game that's being played. Okay, so when all of these countries become a part of BRICS, man, it's going to be game on. You hear me? It's game on. Because you talking about Saudi Arabia, which the U.S. gets the majority of their oil from. And the same with Russia. They was getting a lot of their oil from Russia. So when they say, look, we cutting your ass out, okay? And then now we got Taiwan. Taiwan is responsible. And this is why there's such a big thing between China, Taiwan, and the U.S., because Taiwan is an ally of the U.S., but as far as China goes, Taiwan is an ally of the U.S., correctly. As far as China goes, Taiwan has defected from China, because they've always felt like Taiwan was a part of their regime. And Taiwan is saying, no, we're not. But this is the point I want to make. Taiwan is responsible for 80%, I think it's either 80%, somewhere around there, of creating all the microchips. Semiconductors, that's what I want to say. Semiconductors, not microchips, but semiconductors in the world. So now what China did was China created a relationship with Taiwan's engineers. So now the engineers in Taiwan, and they paid the Taiwanese engineers handsomely to come to China to teach, because that was one area that China was lacking. As great as their technology is, they were lacking in that particular area. So they paid the Taiwanese engineers to come to China and to begin to teach their engineers how to mass produce these semiconductors. So the United States is very nervous. So what is that going to do? Because along with the same thing with the lithium that goes in all of these computers and so forth, so do the semiconductors. They go in everything as well. You understand what I'm saying? They go in everything as well. So the U.S. is very nervous. Like, okay, they're getting Taiwan to do. So now, either the U.S. would have to make a deal with China for these semiconductors, and if China says, you know what, kiss my ass, then the U.S. is going to be in a serious pickle, y'all. And I think Biden just made a critical, stupid ass decision when he put some bans on I believe it was China, and I'm like, why would he do that? So China said, okay, I guess you want to play like that, okay. So this is what we gonna do. So anyways, this is why this is so critical. So if you understand what is actually happening, this is power against power. So now you got all these other nations, as I say, with Brits that are coming on board, and you got Arab nations, you got Argentina, Iran, Nicaragua, Pakistan, uh, who else? I mean, you got several nations, and this is no small feat. This is real serious. So when you're galvanizing all this power and all of these energy-rich countries, Brazil, agriculture, South Africa, you name it, diamonds, copper, cobalt, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. And then you got Venezuela, oil. You got Nicaragua, agriculture. You got, and see, the U.S. is dependent. Even though we do have an agrarian society here, we produce, but we don't produce everything. A lot of stuff, we get a lot of imports too, don't get me wrong. And most of our imports are from China. So what is that going to do? How's that going to fare for this country? See, because these European countries, they're dependent. They're dependent. A lot of these European countries don't have agriculture like that. Okay? And then for the output of their national, their GDPs and so forth, in terms of imports that they totally depend on other nations to give, puts them in a real bad situation. So, again, what we're going to do, we're going to be coming back, and we're going to give you some more of this information as it becomes available to us. Okay, and it says and we'll just read a couple more to you before we go, and we'll come back. Okay. From Nigeria's perspective, fighting corruption, money laundering were considered more important by the Nigerian government. It is due to the fact that the G20's commitments in aid or private investment compacts may also be a prey of corruption and mismanagement. But our efforts to create sustainable economic growth are undermined by corruption facilitated by the legal and financial systems of G20 countries. Listen to that. It says our efforts to create sustainable economic growth are undermined by corruption facilitated by the legal and financial systems of G20 countries. So if European countries want to help Africa succeed, they must help African governments curb corruption. And see, this is where it gets really interesting, because they shouldn't be. You should not be. Why would you look for your colonizers to teach you or to help you curb corruption in your countries? They're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. So this form to me, and I could be wrong, but this form to me of begging these European countries to straighten out your economies and to deal ethically with you is not going to happen. I just don't believe it's going to happen. Okay, it's just not going to happen. It says here, he said, because of failure to do so, could undermine all their other efforts to help Africa prosper. It says a true partnership with Africa by delivering game-changing EU anti-money laundering regulations that prevent the criminal and corrupt from hiding behind anonymity and stealing Africa's future from its people. And of course, I just read, because failure to do so, it would undermine the efforts to help Africa prosper. In the last 50 years, lastly, okay, this is what I'm reading. Over 50 billion is being deposited into various banks across Europe. Listen to that. 50 billion. Okay. Also, Africa has lost 1 trillion to illicit financial flows. If these funds are repatriated back to Africa, it would greatly foster infrastructural development and economic growth. $1 trillion, y'all, that they stole from the continent. $1 trillion damn dollars. These people ain't nothing but thieves. You got to know who you're dealing with. They're thieves. They've been thieves from the beginning. They're not going to stop stealing now. They're thieves. Period. These are strong words, but it's true. These people are thieves. They done carved up the continent 200 years ago. And they still want to steal. They're not going to stop. That's what they do. So it's unfortunate that although the Africans are waking up, you have to know that you're dealing with a thief. You're not dealing with somebody who's honest. You're not dealing with China. China is not robbing you. Russia's not robbing you that I'm aware of. And then the promise of all this infrastructure that the U.S. and all these countries were supposed to do, it hasn't happened. It hasn't happened over the years. And so now they're promising you that they're going to do it. Come on. Let's be honest. So anyway, we're going to stop there. Remember to support, remember to subscribe, like, and share. And again, this is World News with Seth Moore, and we're going to bring in you more of this information as we develop it, as it becomes available. And so we'll see you again very soon. We'll be coming back with more information on Brits and how it's affecting the global economy and community. So until next time, we'll see you. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.